Welcome to episode number 113 of the LSR Podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all of the gaming industry. With me this week, I have Dustin Gouker, Adam Candee. You can follow them on the Twitter machine, and you should. It's free at Dustin Gouker, at Adam Candee, 2 E's, no Y. And I say each and every week at the beginning of all of these shows, guys, and I'll admit, that's kind of a lie. I was out the last 2 weeks, vacationing, more like refreshing, getting pumped up, getting, all of the juices back, creative juices back flowing and all of that as we head into football season, 5 months of the grind. And so glad to be back in the saddle here. Glad to be back on this pod to learn some things that I'll admit, I didn't follow anything over the last 2 weeks whenever I was out. I didn't read anything. I didn't read a single thing. I didn't even read a menu. I was just like, just bring me food. I don't care. I'm not even worried about all that. So it's great to be back here. We're going to talk about what's going on in New York. We'll talk about PointsBet and some money maybe heading their way, Arizona, what's going on there. Of course, we'll get the big state updates from Adam as well. But you may have noticed, if you have downloaded any of the sports betting apps on your phone over the last couple of years, you might have noticed that you got an update here over the last 48 hours, Dustin, and it is a big name that we are saying goodbye to.
Yeah, William Hill largely being retired in the U.S. as an online betting app. We knew this was coming. Caesars bought the U.S. operations of William Hill, and part of that plan was to start leveraging the Caesars Sportsbook with William Hill technology. That actually came to fruition starting earlier this week, and I think mostly complete around the country. Some states a little different than others, but you're largely going to be greeted with a Caesars Sportsbook app now across the country. I think it's a little wonky still in Nevada where you guys are as well. You're still going to see a William Hill app, I believe, moving forward until they figure that out. But this is part of Caesars' larger plan to start competing with the big boys in sports betting, DraftKings, FanDuel, and MGM, and we'll see if this is the first step toward that goal becoming reality.
Yeah, Adam, this was one of the things that I was going to say as Dustin was giving his spiel right there. Is like, yes, except no. Because I have the apps on my phone because I like to check out all the different things from across the country. I saw the update on the rest of country app, and of course here in Nevada we still have William Hill, and this is kind of a thing that we have going on here in Nevada where they kind of operate, we live here, kind of operate in our own little ecosystem, own little bubble here as to where the rest of the country all operates on different platforms, sometimes completely different apps and completely different menus and all of that. That's one of the things that I even noticed this morning. I got a BetMGM app update that said, all of your, every app is found in one place now. You just change the state within the app, except for Nevada, in which you have the BetMGM Nevada app. So it's interesting because there's like Nevada and then there's the rest of the United States.
Right now, if you were to go look for William Hill in the App Store, you would find 5 different apps, because you would get the 3 separate apps that they have for Illinois, for Washington, D.C., and for Nevada. There is a Caesars Sportsbook by William Hill Nevada app, and then there is also the legacy William Hill Nevada app. So have fun with that, anyone in Nevada, with 2 different apps for the same sportsbook. And then there's the main Caesars Sportsbook app, which, when you search for William Hill, pops up. So nothing new here. If you listen to this podcast regularly, you know that Nevada's app technology is willingly Stone Age. The sportsbooks want to make sure that the sharper bettors that are here in Las Vegas and Nevada don't have access to the same type of products that the rest of the country has access to. They want to stay in the dark ages with those. And so that's their choice. But what's going to be interesting now is that as this push continues across the country with Caesars replacing William Hill, guys, they said on their earnings call last night, they are committing $1 billion with a B dollars to customer acquisition over the next 2+ years. Now, that sounds like a big number until you realize that FanDuel and DraftKings have been tossing $750 million a year at marketing, and so you almost wonder if that's enough to keep up.
Yeah, Dustin, one of the other things I wanted to mention about this is just the move here from William Hill to Caesars. I mean, it is one of the things where us who have lived in the bubble for a long time understand what William Hill is, the kind of the big name that William Hill is in the gambling industry, in the gambling world. But one of the things I think that maybe, people, if we step outside the bubble, rest of country, rest of even world, if you want to, I understand this move to Caesars, because I think Caesars within the United States certainly holds a more, I don't know. I mean, you can go and find a Caesars casino. You can find a Caesars brand. You're getting emails that are coming from Caesars Entertainment and stuff. So I can understand why they want to make that move and really go ahead and, before we get into football season, I should say, rebrand into Caesars from William Hill.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly a much more valuable brand than William Hill. We've seen sportsbook operators from Penn National to everyone else look at ways to increase their brand. And this is the easiest way. Outside of us, even if you're into sports betting, you're like, what's a William Hill? You might it has no name recognition unless you're in Nevada, or there's been a few land-based places around the country you might have heard of William Hill before. It doesn't have any value, and you're like, if you're trying to market William Hill, it just doesn't resonate here in the U.S. So Caesars, this is a no-brainer from that standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, to say, oh, here's a Caesars brand. People have likely heard of the Caesars property in Nevada, or as you said, there's Caesars properties kind of in a lot of states around the country. So it's much better there. You can link this to Caesars Rewards as well. You're trying to get online casino as well, because Caesars is much more of is also a casino brand as it rolls out across the country. So it just makes a ton of sense that this is the brand. With Adam on the $1 billion, yeah, I don't know. We've said this many times. This is the cost of trying to compete. If you want to compete, that is what you have to do. You either have to do something drastic like buy a brand. Caesars already thinks it has the good brand. There's not really a reason for it to purchase something, or to spend inane amounts of money. And that when you hear $1 billion, it sounds like an inane amount of money. But that's if they want to compete, it's not going to just be opening the doors and saying, "Hey, come bet at Caesars Sportsbook." It's putting a ton of money into customer acquisition.
And Adam, circling back to Nevada here, I think one of the other things that maybe why we're not seeing the rebrand completely just yet is it seems like they still have a lot to work out here in Nevada, because one of the things with them being a third-party operator up until recently with Caesars buying them, they are present and very present inside other casino brands right now. And so you have, if you went over to, let's call it the Venetian or Palazzo right now, it is the William Hill Sportsbook inside the Venetian Palazzo, but now it's owned by Caesars. And so you're probably not going to find the Caesars Sportsbook inside the Venetian Palazzo, or, all of these other casinos that were using William Hill as their sports betting provider. So we're probably going to see also, again, Cosmopolitan is another casino here on the Strip that was using William Hill that you're probably going to see a new operator. So there's probably still some logistics to be worked out here in Nevada, as well as to what are these other properties going to do with their sports books?
It really has to do with those smaller properties as well. I mean, the William Hill brand is ubiquitous in Nevada, largely because they'd cornered a lot of that retail market early on, before mobile sports betting caught on in a lot of different places in Nevada, before the companies that are involved now decided to really invest heavily in it. So it'll be fascinating to watch. I'm looking forward to playing with the Caesars Sportsbook by William Hill Nevada app to see how it compares to the legacy William Hill Nevada app.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've looked at this new app after the rebrand or whatever. Of course, it looks different. It looks new. It looks slick. They did a redesign and all of that, and I think that there will be customers out there that will be drawn to it. I thought that it was a pretty good job done by them in this one. All right, Adam, we can't get through a podcast without talking about New York, so let me kick it to you and what's going over there.
And really, would you want to? No, I mean, you want to talk New York. The first bids for mobile sports betting in New York are due on Monday. There was another round of Q&A released by the New York State Gaming Commission. Really didn't dive too far into anything else. We didn't learn a whole lot about what is expected of operators. And as Dustin and I chatted about a little bit last week, the most fascinating part of all of this is when the bids finally are viewed in some way, shape, or form, to see what sort of sportsbook Voltron has come together to try to put in for one of these super bids, because we've heard so many rumors now about sportsbooks and platforms coming together in order to place a bid with this expected north of 50%, 55, 60% revenue share to be offered to the state of New York. One more thing to add in about this, and this has been brought up in a few places, and I think Dustin's dealt with it on Twitter, and we actually wrote about this when Andrew Cuomo's scandals first began. The report that came out from the New York Attorney General yesterday has led some people to ask us, well, what happens to mobile sports betting in New York if Cuomo resigns? And the answer is nothing. This has been passed. This is in law. This is in the budget. They're not going to go back and change anything now just because Cuomo is gone, and Cuomo is the driving force behind the idea of having a state-run monopoly on sportsbook. Like, this is done. It could potentially, if Cuomo were not there, mean that the timeline to go back and redo something in future years is shortened. But keep in mind that the bidding process right now rewards sportsbooks for larger revenue share with longer-term licenses. And so if someone's going to be granted a 10-year license at certain terms, you might be looking at the state of New York saying, you know what? This works pretty well for us. It might take underperformance in some way for them to be willing to go and say, all right, we're going to try to change this up.
Dustin, that is not the only New York news that we have coming out this week. What do we have in the DFS world?
I mean, this is like throwback year. We're talking about DFS and laws and kind of wild. This is what we were doing back in 2015 and 16. But the case that has been around for a long time about the legality of the DFS law that New York passed back in 2016. There's a court case that started back then, soon after that law got passed, and two different courts along the way in New York have deemed the law that they passed to be against the Constitution, and that basically that what we learn now is that this is finally being heard at the final appeal stop in New York, and there's a court date set in October for this to start getting heard. So this is we're now to the end game of this 5 years later, but we've been writing about this story for a long time. But the really interesting dynamic here is if DraftKings and FanDuel, or if actually the state of New York loses this case, because they're the ones defending it as they passed this law, and they have to say, they're defending the law that they can regulate and legalize DFS. The end game is that DraftKings and FanDuel and anybody else who was operating in New York, in theory, would have to pull out for daily fantasy sports. But we also believe and think that DraftKings and FanDuel are likely to be the sports betting operators in New York. That would be a wild scenario that we're seeing here in 2021, where DraftKings, FanDuel can operate sports betting, can't operate DFS, and as you know, and I like to speculate, that whole law was basically the turning point for DraftKings and FanDuel. That didn't happen. We are not sitting here probably talking about both of those brands being number one and number two in U.S. sports betting. There's some question about whether one or both of those companies would still be in existence without that New York law, because if you recall or not up to speed, that was breathed life into legalization efforts across the country. If they had to pull out of New York, their revenue would have decreased immensely in the short term back in 2016. So it's a wild scenario, but who knows? Going back to Adam and the point about that, it doesn't affect sports betting or what's going on there, especially the Cuomo stuff. But it is also wild to think about Cuomo. If they had waited on this bill, they're doing this to appease. Somehow Cuomo is leveraging a lot of power still in the budget process, and basically got the sports betting plan that he wanted. If they had waited, maybe we would have gotten a better sports betting plan. But that's all, like Adam says, that's water under the bridge. We are where we are. So the hope is that without Cuomo in power, there's a possibility to revise the law in the future, if that happens. As we're sitting here, who knows? He is still in power and has not resigned, but it's increasingly looking difficult for him to survive the process here. It
certainly does look like that might not be the case by the time we record next week. Adam, we talked about Caesars and $1 billion that they are going to invest into sports betting, and you even raised the question, could that even be enough because of the spend that's going on with everybody else and still trying to play catch up? I think we would all be fair to say that, they are a distant fourth, fifth, something like that, when it comes to everything right now with MGM and FanDuel and DraftKings being up there. Now we have PointsBet, who has been around since the beginning here, an Australian company that is trying to really break through in the United States. They have mentioned that they're going to be getting some more money into play here as well, but it's even less than the $1 billion you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, when we talk scale, we're generally talking about PointsBet operating on a much smaller scale than a lot of the other operators in the United States. They're going to raise $300 million, which, again, no small amount when it comes to being able to market yourself. But when you're trying to compete against the war chests that we just talked about, it's far less. They released that information as part of talking about their fiscal year from last year, in which they reported an operating loss just south of $90 million. Again, operating loss is not anything all that uncommon when we talk about sports books in the U.S. space. PointsBet still has a ways to go, though. I mean, the largest market share that it can report is south of 8% in New Jersey and Illinois. Now, those are two good markets to have 8%. 8% does mean something in terms of the handle there, but it also highlights the fact that PointsBet had made a pretty large wager on Illinois being one of the states that they could make real headway in with the in-person registration requirement. They had gotten themselves a great location on the edges of Chicago. And then the pandemic hit, and Governor Pritzker opened up the market for remote registration. FanDuel and DraftKings were no longer the targets of Neil Bloom and Bet Rivers, at least in terms of accuracy of target anymore. And so that kind of set PointsBet back a bit. But it'll be interesting to see. I mean, they do plan to play in all of the upcoming states. And, you know, I think it's one of those companies where over the course of the next few years, you could see them take a little jump up and maybe establish themselves around 5th or 6th, nationally in terms of share. But the question is going to be: is that going to be enough? Is that going to generate profit, or is this a company that ultimately is going to consolidate and be sold maybe to one of the larger operators as they build up a database?
Yeah, that was where I was going with this, Dustin, is kind of like you look at PointsBet and you see these other companies that have been bought out to this point, and we've talked about that there are still some people lurking out there that may or may not be looking to get in, officially into sports betting. Of course, ESPN being the very, very big, very, very top of all of that and whatnot. You do have a PointsBet company that has their own software, that has their own app. They operate their own line. So it's you would be buying kind of a turnkey solution here with, the acquisition of that company or something. So I don't know. I guess I've always just looked at PointsBet, and perhaps this is just wrong, a wrong opinion that I've had, but I kind of always looked at them as a company that's just kind of hanging out until they get bought. Is that something that you've felt at all along the way, or do you kind of think that, okay, look, slow and steady, maybe they just kind of outlast and end up in that, top 5 range. And if you're in the top 5 range in a robust U.S. market, we're still in the infancy of all this. That's plenty.
I mean, I think M&A is what makes the most sense for them, for sure. I don't know if it's like clearly just, they just did this to be bought. I think they think they have a chance, and I think they've done well with what they've done, honestly.
For sure.
But yeah, you look at the, if we're talking about the short-term horizon, we're far from done for sports betting. It's not FanDuel and DraftKings and BetMGM until sunset. Like there's people who can cut in, but if you're looking over a shorter horizon, you're also competing with now Caesars, Bally's, which has put zillions of dollars into this, Barstool, which we haven't even talked about yet in all of this. Like, how are you getting into that top 3 and also like getting past all of those? What is your story? What is your narrative? And what is your plan to do that? $300 million is nice, but is that, again, we're talking it's hard to dismiss it, but it's not that much money in the grand scheme of things to do this. You're going up against just absolutely massive companies that are putting much more money into this and already have better established brands. So it's what makes the most sense to me is PointsBet getting acquired by somebody. I don't know who that somebody is, but yeah, for the short term, I think they continue. I mean, they have good product too. I think we'd all agree with that. They have a good app. They do things a little differently. I like the company, but it is hard to see where maybe they continue to get the branding out there. PointsBet becomes a little bit more not a household name, but a name known around sports betting, and they do something. But I'd say M&A fodder is the thing that makes the most sense, and we'll see whether that happens over the next few years or even sooner.
Adam, we're talking about Arizona and how fast that kind of all came about. The partnerships were rapid. We know that the law, basically, the ink wasn't even dry. We started hearing about deals that were getting done. We know that there's deals with the racetrack there. We know TPC Scottsdale. We know the Suns, the Mercury. We know that everybody is partnering up there so that these guys can get access to that state. It looks like we are starting to at least look like maybe we have an idea of who all is going to be able to get in, because almost all of the partnerships have been taken at this point. What are we looking at there in Arizona?
Well, that's the interesting part here, is that we've had now nearly double-digit partnerships announced, and yet we haven't handed out a license yet. So there's no guarantee that everybody announcing a partnership gets a license, although you would think that would be the case. But the licensing process is ongoing here on August 4th with a planned September 9th launch. TwinSpires finds its partner with the Tonto Apache tribe, and that now means that, let's make sure I have this accurately, Bally's, Barstool, Caesars, DraftKings, FanDuel, Kindred, PointsBet, WinBet, along with TwinSpires, are into the Arizona market. There are 20 total licenses to be handed out in Arizona, 10 between teams or professional sports organizations and sportsbooks, 10 for tribal gaming interests. Now, there is a process in place if there are more than 20 applicants for sports betting in Arizona. We don't know if that will be the case yet. 20 has shown in most jurisdictions to be a pretty high amount of licenses. It is a fairly accessible market. You're looking at a 10% tax on mobile sports betting revenue, so it's not a market that is going to cost a lot to get into, and it does have all 4 professional sports teams and pretty thriving spring training and visitation, so lots of ways to potentially skin that cat in Arizona, and it'll be interesting to see if we get all the way up to 20 announced before the licensing is done.
Dustin, I know that the original target was to have everything up and running by football season down there in Arizona. We sit here August 4. We know that football season starts in a month. Does that seem possible to you now that we know that we have all these partnerships? Yeah, but as Adam just mentioned, ain't nobody got a license right now.
Yeah, I mean, officials doubled down recently, saying they're going to hit the September 9th deadline of trying to launch sports betting. So, I mean, I guess that we have to listen to them until we're presented with information to the contrary. But yeah, it's wild that we don't even know who's licensed. Like, you're just apparently, you're gonna depend that that these applicants who are vetted in other states are vetted to your specifications, and that you're okay with what is already gone. You're just piggybacking on what other people have done, because there is not going to be some great regulatory vetting process here on any sportsbook that's launching in U.S. And maybe it isn't needed, but it's very different from what we've seen in any other state, that there is a long run up from law and regulation to actually launching, other than Indiana, which I think we see it was one of the fastest in several months from law to launch. So yeah, I guess it's wild to me that it seems it's going to happen. I guess I'm still a little bearish that they do that, because like you said, there is a lot to still do in Arizona to get there. But that's what they're telling us, is September 9th you're going to have online sports betting in Arizona, or some sort of sports betting.
Adam, going back to one of the things that you said about Arizona, which I think is something that I've thought about as well, but I want to drive it home here because you mentioned it. But with Arizona, it is one of those kind of like under the radar kind of guy tourist attraction places, with all the golf courses there in Scottsdale, and you mentioned the pro sports teams that are there in Phoenix. The Phoenix airport is also a hub for a couple of different airlines as well, so there could be people who are just sitting in a layover who might decide that they want to get in on some action or something like that. I think whenever we look at Arizona, and the population doesn't just jump off the page to you, and when you talk about major cities, there isn't a whole there isn't a slew of major cities or something like that in Arizona, but I do think kind of an under the radar market here that might do some numbers that end up surprising some people, especially again, I keep saying this, but with DraftKings having a sports book at one of these destination golf courses where people are going to be going and spending 2 and 3 days and all that, I think there could be some interesting numbers come out of Arizona.
Without question, and also keep in mind that the Glendale area, the part of the Phoenix Valley, is in the regular rotation for both the Super Bowl and the College Football Playoff National Championship. So that being the case, you have big draw events. And Matt, I'll throw something back to you because it's only a half-hour drive from Henderson, where I live, over the Hoover Dam. If folks who are in Las Vegas want to be able to get some action on certain sports books that they're not able to access here in Nevada, that will definitely be available in Arizona.
Listen, I know idiots who drive like to California to get in daily fantasy lineups and able who are, so that they can do that legally. And I can only imagine that some idiots are going to be possibly heading across the border down there to take advantage of some of these offerings that we do not get here in Nevada. And, full disclosure here, we'll pull back the curtain a little bit. I have flown to Denver and done 24 hours in Denver to go and take advantage of, certain things that have gone on during the NFL season and things like that. And now the fact that I don't have to get on an airplane and fly to Colorado and will be able to just make that drive across the border, I think there will be a lot of people who do that. I mean, listen, we talk about the people that live here, and when New Jersey market opened, I personally knew of a lot of people who were kind of flying back and forth between Vegas and Jersey to take advantage of the two different offerings and stuff. Now, a lot of those people either go to Colorado now or have even just relocated up to Colorado to have all the various offers. But I do think that you're going to see some of these guys out here now that it is a drive, like you said, just right down the road. And with NFL only being once a week, it's not one of those things where it's like that crazy of a deal to be like, I'll take off on a Saturday afternoon or a Saturday morning and drive down there. And, but yeah, it takes 2 hours for me, 30 minutes down there, maybe an hour to do the bets and 30 minutes back. Like 2 hours out of your day is not like the craziest thing in the whole world to go down there and take advantage of what are certain to be awesome sign-up bonus offers, the free bets, the match bets, all the different things like that you see that these guys offer. So yeah, I'm with you 100%. I think people are going to do it.
Well, it'll be fascinating to watch, and I think we'll start to hear those stories come around pretty quickly in Nevada among the circles that you and I run in.
Yeah. And I mean, Caesars alone. I mean, we didn't even talk about this. Caesars has rolled out a $5,000 risk-free bet, right? Like you could say, oh, $5,000 free. I could go get on a plane and do that just for that. Like half-hour drive across the border to Arizona if and when Caesars launches. Sure, and that's just one of we talk about these. It's it's a great if you're a customer who doesn't already have accounts and all these things. It's no brainer if you're in Nevada.
I know
to go.
We say it all the time. We try not to talk. Yeah, we try not to talk about the sign up. Yeah, I mean the sign up stuff and on this part, but really, I mean, yeah, it really is like with all that stuff. It's just enticing to, especially for people who aren't used to getting all of that stuff. Certainly worth doing. Dustin, let's talk about, we talk about states with populations that don't jump off the page to you. Let's hit on Wyoming here.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Wyoming as probably the next launch, probably beating Arizona. They've talked about a September 1st launch there. They finalized the rules there. They have 5 licenses available. We know some of the three big ones, DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, have all put in letters of intent to operate in the state. So yeah, we're looking on Wyoming, not quite as fast as Arizona, but still pretty fast from law to launch, but a little bit less complicated, not as many people interested because, like you said, 500,000 people in Wyoming, not a huge market, but when you're a big company, you're like, well, why not? You already have a database, especially if you're DraftKings and FanDuel, of probably some DFS folks who you can just instantly convert to sports betting. So, yep, small market, but it does add to the ledger of states with a more open online sports betting there. And my only regret is I was in Wyoming before this launch, and then I cannot be betting while I was hanging out in the Tetons.
I know that would have been great. They certainly would have made Wyoming maybe even better, but I saw the photos and they were absolutely stunning. I was jealous of your trip for sure. Guys, we're on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google. Just to mention that, go in, subscribe, rate, and review. We really do appreciate that. And as we said, you should follow Dustin on the Twitter machine at Dustin Gouker. You should follow Adam at Adam Candee, 2 E's, no Y. And if you really do hate yourself, you can follow me at Matt Brown M2. Adam,
we were told you worked on your Twitter, so it should be better.
It should be
while you're gone.
It should be. Listen, okay. I try to do just the little things, right? I'm always working. I'm a work in progress. I understand that I'm not finished product here, guys. So I'm trying as hard as I can. Adam, take us home with our state updates.
When we look at the states that still have to go here, we're still looking at Maryland. We're still looking at Louisiana. We're still looking at South Dakota. Nothing huge to report out of Maryland or Louisiana of late. The biggest thing we can say is in South Dakota, the rules have been approved. It's a very limited market in South Dakota. You're looking at in person in Deadwood. This will be probably one of the smaller sports betting markets, along with Arkansas, in the entire country. Not much to say when it comes to that state. Massachusetts is a state where everybody knows that we've been talking about 24 bills that have now been consolidated down to a couple. No movement in the Senate. We keep checking. We keep asking. The Senate, I'm guessing everyone is either at Cape Cod or Martha's Vineyard or somewhere vacationing for the rest of the summer because they have a session that runs through the end of the year and they're not feeling any urgency to get things going because, frankly, there's no chance that they get something done in time for this NFL season. So I think they kind of see that 2022 is the more realistic target for the state of Massachusetts, and there are things to resolve between the Senate and House bills. So nothing new to report out of Massachusetts. There have definitely been some rumblings in Florida. And I put this in giant air quotes, Florida education champions of FanDuel and DraftKings have been starting to round up folks for their petition that is upcoming to try to open up the Florida sports betting market beyond just Hard Rock and the Seminole Tribe. So we'll see where that ends up in future months.
Guys, as always, everything we talk about here on the pod, you can find over at LegalSportsReport.com. Go in, read the articles, give Adam and his team all the credit that they deserve, keeping you up to date on everything that's going on. You can find an article on what's going on in Ontario. You can see that there might even be a couple more books coming to Tennessee, so be sure and head over there and take a look at all of that. For Adam, for Dustin, I'm Matt. Talk to you guys next week.